This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Sports Interaction. Sports Interaction is your homegrown sports book where local takes on an entirely different meaning, focusing on the teams, games, and players that matter to you. Sports Interaction is on the ground, on top of all the local trends, and offering prop bets that you'd never even imagined existed. From same game parlays to a best in class casino featuring thousands of games and live 24/7 dealers, giving you that Vegas experience any time of day. And now introducing the Locker Room, the first of its kind in Canada, a live watch party for the biggest games of the week, providing in-game betting tips built directly into the app. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Go to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to open an account. Bet local. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. If you have questions or concerns about your gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please go to connexontario.ca.
I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear? Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
We start off the week with Ask CJ, talk about Corey Perry, Jacob Trouba. There was an incident that happened with him over the weekend that I'd like for us to discuss. There could be some news coming on Patrick Kane. Before we get to all of that, CJ, we start in Toronto, in your neck of the woods. The spotlight, once again, burning on the back of the neck of one Mitchell Marner. Doesn't seem like fans, at least, are that happy with him. It feels as if Sheldon Keefe, it doesn't seem as if he feels his players got into that groove he needs to get into. For people like myself who are outside the market and don't watch the Leafs as much as you do, they might see his stats and think, okay, 20 points in 19 games. But is that enough? Does he need to give more? How do you see this current situation with Mitch Marner?
Well, I mean, you got to understand there always needs to be something. It just seems that that's part of the way narratives work around teams that have the kind of following the Leafs do. And, it just so happens that the Leafs lost 2 games in a row on the weekend. Sheldon Keefe offered what I would deem to be a very fair and measured critique of Marner's game, that he hasn't been at the level the Leafs, he hasn't been in the kind of groove you'd expect. And all of that just snowballs online. So I think that's probably the best explanation I could give you on why this is a topic. I'm with you in looking at the situation as a whole, though, and not being too overly concerned about it. I mean, if you're sitting here and you're looking at a player who has 20 points in 19 games and you're saying he hasn't been at his best, I would argue then, just given on 8 years of history here, this is probably going to end up in a spot where Mitch Marner has another 90-point season. Because if he's not at his best and he's still a point per game player, I don't expect him to have an entire year where it's a down. But, there's no denying, and it's a factor so far in what's going on. The Leafs top line has just not looked as dominant as much as you'd like, as you've seen in the past. I think there's probably all kinds of potential reasons for that. That's with the coaching staff, and I think that's a high urgency situation for the team right now, is to try to address that, look for ways for them to get better. I mean, obviously they go against top competition every night and those types of things. But they just haven't popped in the same way at 5-on-5 you'd like. And Marner's a huge part of that. I mean, he's, I think we all know who he is at this point. And so, I would also point you to the fact he had almost the exact same statistical numbers through 20 games last year and ended up, with 35 goals, 90 plus points, whatever it was. So I'm not sounding the alarm here, but obviously this has become a talking point in the market. And I think it's just for those reasons I mentioned. I mean, you got to be talking about something, and, it's not been normal because Mitch Marner's just been such a superior player really from the day he entered the league to have a point in time where you can question, what he's giving. And I think those questions are fair. I don't want to go too far the other way, because let's face it, I'd be stunned if he was anything less than a point per game this year. And that's rarefied air in the league.
I mean, to me, it just seems like, and by the way, like, I'm not being facetious or anything like that when I ask these questions about Mitch, because this is a guy who is slightly above a point per game player right now. And it wouldn't surprise me if he had himself another successful season. And the way that he's being viewed, at least from my standpoint, I'm just like we're a quarter of the season in, and this is what people are upset about. Wasn't the defense the issue? Wasn't the bottom six the issue with this team? Like, why is Mitch Marner, a guy who, I mean, I don't know where he stands in the point standings on this team. I'm sure he's behind William Nylander right now. Like, why is he getting it? Like, why is he in this spotlight?
What's he got? 3 points in 7 games.
That's not that great. I'll give
again,
him that. That's not that great.
Here's the thing, like, and your point's fair, but like, there's not one issue with any team. Like, every team at any moment in time has multiple issues, and those issues change and evolve over time, right? I mean, this is I'd say a lowercase I issue right now for the Leafs, because their top line is not popping, and Mitch Marner at the end of the day is only 1/3 of that top line. I'm not going to heap too much on Matthew Nyes, who's playing left wing currently on the Leafs top line. He's a rookie. I think that it should be expected that Matthews and Marner, are really carrying a lot of the load there. And it just hasn't worked to the way it has in the past. I think what's interesting last year is when the Leafs got to a similar point in time, they actually broke up Matthews and Marner for a period of time. That's not something we've seen Sheldon Keefe do, to this point in the season, but you wonder if it's coming. It's a hard thing to do because we've talked so much in a positive light about William Nylander and what he's been able to do. He's been part of a pretty successful unit this last month or so with Bertuzzi and Tavares, and so I think you always run that risk as a coach if you're going to split up a unit that isn't working. Are you going to is the net effect going to be negative if everybody needs to find some time to get comfortable? I'm sure that's part of the daily discussions of the coaching staff, but when it comes to Marner, I think it's fair because it's clearly a down period. Like there's no getting around that. I just think when you're dealing with someone who's still young, or young enough, he's certainly in the prime of his career still, who's consistently performed at the level he has, I just think you can't get too concerned. I mean, if we're halfway through the year and we haven't seen him pop a little bit, I think that starts to take on more questions. The NHL's released this new stats data, Julian, this year.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate it is, and I'm not trying to call into question its accuracy, but I'm just saying this is a new thing. We're still getting used to it, but Marner hasn't hit the same speed skating wise as he did last year, according to this data. He's not shot the puck as hard. You wonder, maybe is there something physically that isn't quite right with him? Again, I don't want to put too much stock in that data because I don't know how accurate it is, and that's something obviously you can't really detect with the eye. I think what you can detect with the eye watching the Leafs games, though, is that he just hasn't quite had the same magic with the puck. I mean, usually he's a zone entry machine, obviously really gifted player in terms of setting up his teammates for goals. I know he scores 30 plus too, so it's not as though he's lax in that area. He's also playing in a different spot on the power play this year. The Leafs have shuffled things around. He's not in as much of a shooting position there, so that might attribute to some of the goal production being down a little bit. I think this is kind of where we're at. I mean, the Leafs are in an interesting spot. They've had a very meh start to the year, right? I mean, I think that's the larger subtext to all this is that, they've got these 5 regulation wins and we're almost to December now. And so, they've managed to hold their place in the standings reasonably enough because they've won some games in overtime and a shootout, but you just haven't seen too many wins. They had one against Vancouver, a 5-2 win where they kind of took control of the game and sucked the life out of it and beat an opponent. They haven't done that enough. They've really, they just haven't looked that sharp. I mean, they had a lead in Chicago on Friday and end up losing to, a team that could finish 32nd in the standings. They have a lead in Pittsburgh, lose that game. Even some of the games they played in Sweden, they came away with 2 victories there, but they were tight victories, and one Minnesota came back and they had to pull it out in overtime with the Nylander goal. So, I would say the Leafs have not been as dominant as they're used to being. I think we might look at some of the offseason additions as part of that too. That that those just haven't.
I think you should, to be quite honest with you.
Those just haven't largely
at the beginning
worked yet.
Yeah,
right.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to cut you off here, but like at the beginning of the year, it seemed as if like those were the issues, and in fact, like Marner and Matthews, those guys were working, and the whole thing was the fact that this team, once again, cannot just rely on its top heavy stars. And now there's a bit of a lull period, and the spotlight's on him. If I'm at Mitch Marner, I don't think that's fair. I didn't build this team. This team should be so much better at defending and goaltending and all these things. Everyone's just mad at me because I make $11 million. Like, when it's time for me to when I need to be on in the regular season, I'll be on. In the playoffs, completely different story. He needs to be way better. But I don't know. If I'm Mitch Marner, I'm kind of looking at this being like what is this?
Well, this is what you sign up for, though. I mean,
I
if you
agree.
sign an $11 million
In a market like Toronto,
contract,
you're
or like Austin Matthews, his next deal is $13.25 million contract to be the star for the Leafs. Part of what comes with that is a probably over infatuation or over, what's the right word here? It's a Monday and I'm struggling for the word, but it's like a micro analysis of your game at all times, right? That you just don't get in like conservatively, like 20 to 25 markets around the league. Players are maybe like, they're not awful, but they're not great. And it just goes under the radar, right? It's not discussed. It doesn't become a point. I mean, Toronto and a few others are different beasts. Montreal, Vancouver. I think some of the Rangers get covered this way. I mean, there are a few teams where the ebbs and flows of every little thing that happens, gets put under the microscope. And I think that's just part of Toronto. So you're right. It might not be fair, but it is, you should expect it. And this is not new to Mitch. Obviously he's played here for a long time. He's from Toronto. And so, the good news is the same way we might have gone in on, Connor McDavid a little bit. All of a sudden, Connor McDavid has 9 points in 2 games over the weekend. So all that talk goes away. I'm not predicting that kind of outburst for Mitch Marner, but it would not be surprising to see him have like 6 points in the next 2 games, and then no one's talking about it. And everything just moves on, and then the focus is back on the blue line, or it's on, how the fourth line isn't working, or, the fact that Ryan Reeves is scratched, so frequently after signing a 3-year contract in the offseason, or what's going on with John Klingberg. I mean, the story carousel will just land on another square at some point here. I don't mean to be so flippant about it, because you're right. This is really flared up in recent days, but I do think it's generally much ado about nothing, unless, this is my caveat, if we fast forward 20 more games and we're in a similar spot, then okay, then I'm in for the conversation. It just still feels a little early to be too critical of a guy still producing at a point per game, even if he hasn't been his same dominant self.
We both agree here. You mentioned John Klingberg, placed on LTIR a couple days ago. What's the latest with him?
It's an unfortunate situation. I think that where we stand right now really is John Klingberg is deciding or not, obviously in consultation with the Leafs medical team and anyone else he leans on to have, a hip surgery that would basically end his season. At this point in time, as we're recording this, he hasn't elected for that surgery. And so things are a little bit in flux now. There's no rush here because he last played November 11th. He has to sit out at least 10 games in 24 days. So that takes you almost to mid-December before he's even eligible to come off LTIR. So, in the meantime, I think he continues to get treatment from the Leafs medical staff, obviously going through the process of deciding, what's best. Is he going to be able to just, get by with this treatment and maybe a little bit of rest time here and play again this season or not? And the reason this is a focal point is obviously if he gets the surgery and he's done for the year, well, then the Leafs have his $4.15 million in salary that they can now spend as LTIR money on another player or players, multiple. If he's going to come off and play again in mid-December, which, hasn't been ruled out, I think it's more than likely he's headed the surgery route. But again, until that happens, if he's, gets healthy enough to return, then the Leafs only have this short window now while he's sidelined to use that money. And so, I think that's kind of why this is getting focused on so much. I don't understand those though that are like drawing the sort of Robida Island.
I was about to ask that. Yeah, a lot of people were doing that connection.
I think it's unfair, honestly. In fact, I know it's unfair. I mean, John Klingberg has been dealing with hip issues for years. He actually had double hip surgery this summer, right before he entered the NHL with the Dallas Stars. This is not a new issue. Obviously, it's got to a point now where the fact that surgery is even on the table, it's gotten worse. He took a hit in the game the Leafs played in Florida in October and just hasn't been quite the same since then. But this isn't a case of like the Leafs making someone go away. I think the truth is, in being around Klingberg a bit, like clearly he wants to play. Obviously, like he's, no one wants to undergo the kind of procedure he's facing. I think it's similar to what you've seen Jesse Puljujarvi, Patrick Kane, go through here, and there's a number of other players. I mean, hip injuries, it's like, unfortunately, it's extremely common now for players. If you see how many players have had these resurfacing procedures, but it's not something you want to go through. It's 6 to 8 months of recovery. I think it's a grueling recovery. And obviously in Klingberg's position, he's 31 years old and doesn't have a contract for next year. So it would definitely throw his career into a little bit of the unknown. Now, it might be that that's what he needs to get done to even have a chance to play at the kind of level he wants to again. I mean, that's, I'm sure what everyone's triangulating behind the scenes, but I don't think there's anything remotely fishy about this one. I mean, if you watched him play, the guy can't skate. He can't move. I mean, when he was at his best, what made him a 50-point defenseman for years and years and years with the Stars was he skated so well, right? He distributed the puck well, and he was a great skater. I mean, he has no mobility now. And this is something he has dealt with in the past. He's been managing. I know last year in Anaheim, it was something that he had to manage on an ongoing basis, and was obviously hoping to do so again here in Toronto. It just hasn't happened. And that's kind of how we are where we are. But I just think I get it. In some respects, it was almost a meme back in the day, right? First of all, that was 2 GMs ago. It was Lou Lamoriello came in. Everyone knew the Leafs were sort of going through a tank/rebuild or whatever you want to call it. Some of the players like Stefan Robida at the time, Joffrey Lupul, were put on LTIR and kind of made to disappear. I will point out, neither of those players played again in the NHL anywhere else, though. Like, it wasn't as though the Leafs have this long history of putting players on LTIR who surface somewhere else. I mean, for the most part, we're talking about guys whose careers are over. I'm not predicting that here for Klingberg, but obviously if he goes through a surgery that doesn't allow him to play this season, I don't think there's anything untoward happening, as much as all the conspiracy theorists and Twitter haters might want to make it so.
All right. Today's edition of Leafs Corner has been brought to you by Anxiety and Long-Term Injured Reserve.
And multiple generations of trauma.
Yeah, don't forget about that. We'll talk about Patrick Kane and a few other news and notes. We'll get to your questions as well on the other side of our sports interaction time.
It's all part of the game. Yeah, I just gotta go hard.
Welcome to You Can Bet That. David Basto from Sports Interaction is here with us. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Let's take a look at some futures for the Hart Trophy. Right now, your betting favorite, according to Sports Interaction, is...
Surprise, surprise, still Connor McDavid. And the only reason I say this is because we all know, and you guys have talked about this at length, about the Oilers' struggles this year, McDavid's injury struggles this year, but he's still the favorite right now at Sports Interaction, CJ, paying about plus 400, so 4 times your money. But it's interesting because I think in the last little while, and I was really hoping that Jack Hughes wasn't on the sideline so long because I think he'd be a lot higher. He's still in that conversation. He's still on the sideline. Pasternak's in that conversation. Austin Matthews, surprise, surprise, is the highest rated Leaf, but you add guys like Quinn Hughes to the conversation and Elias Pettersson to the conversation as well. And I'm kind of curious, Nikita Kucherov leads the NHL in scoring. There's another guy for you as well. I think it's kind of wide open, don't you think?
For sure. I mean, compared to some recent years where I think it was way more apparent, even 2 months into the season, it's more open. I like McDavid, though. I mean, 4-1 is pretty good odds for a guy who's won that trophy as much as he has. I mean, just coming off 9 points in his last 2 games. So he already looks a lot better sitting here this Monday than he did last Monday for that kind of role. And obviously, if the Oilers get back into the playoff race, if they make the playoffs, I mean, I think a lot of people will be crediting McDavid for pulling them into that fight. So, it is a wide open field. I like looking at Vancouver too, because they've been one of the big surprises of the year. It just might be hard to pick between Hughes or Pettersson, or maybe even a Demko. Who knows? Maybe we get a goalie in the mix this season.
Let me ask you one thing before we go here, guys. Because of what Quinn Hughes has gone through so far, and everything's been, when you look at his Norris Trophy numbers, apparently he's already won it. So does that take away from his Hart Trophy candidacy, CJ, at all?
Well, I don't know how he's won it because I haven't yet voted. So I mean, it's
you should see the numbers, my friend. It was like, wow.
Yeah, I think it almost strengthens it, honestly. I mean, I know Julian and I are both voters. If I have someone in a number one spot, say for Norris, it doesn't make me not want to make them for Hart. I think if ultimately, you qualify as the best candidate in the eyes of the voter for both, I mean, I see no problem with that. We've seen lots of guys like McDavid win, 3 or 4 awards. Some of them are automatic, like goal scoring and points and the like. But, I think, look, there's a lot of runway on this season yet. And I think that's what makes this debate worth it, because you could probably make a case for 10 guys right now, credibly.
All right. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. Before game, in-game best props for all the best odds as well. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Thank you, DB.
Thanks, guys.
CJ, Patrick Kane still without a home. Where could he sign? Is he close to signing anywhere? What's the latest with Patrick Kane?
Yes, I would suggest we are within a day or days of learning where Patrick Kane plans to return this season. I wish I could tell you where it was going to be. I mean, my views have not changed from what we talked about a few weeks ago. I think he's very, very, very likely to land in the Eastern Conference. I think one of the complications that's come along is some of the teams where he's willing to play, really just don't have a lot of cap space for him. And so, he's got to decide, does he want to prioritize making maybe a little bit more money, closer to what he's actually worth, signing maybe a longer term deal, like a couple of years? Is he willing to maybe just go to the best team that he thinks has a chance to win, but might not have the cap space? Like, I think that's part of what he's had to weigh. I mean, I do know he was open to a return to the Rangers, for example. But, look at the Rangers, first of all, right at the top of the league in points percentage, but not with a lot of cap room in order to sign him. And so, I think that ultimately it's going to come down to a decision for him and his family, where he's got to weigh all those options. I think Detroit remains a distinct possibility. The Red Wings have had a pretty strong start to the year. They are a team with some cap space, and so I think that they could certainly pay him a little bit more than he might get elsewhere. Keep an eye on the Florida Panthers. I know some eyebrows are raised over the weekend. They put Mike Riley on waivers. He was ultimately claimed by the Islanders, but was that a move done with an eye towards at least, opening up a little bit more of a spot? I mean, it's going to be interesting. And I think ultimately what we'll quickly swing to, as soon as we learn where he's signing, is, what can he be, right? I mean, he's coming off this significant surgery, the hip resurfacing procedure. He's been skating in the GTA. I know he's had some other players out there skating with them, obviously ramping himself up. And it's not easy for any player to join midstream into the year, but coming off that kind of injury, will this hip surgery have proven to vaulted him back on track, or ultimately, can he get back to that level? I think that, it's going to take some time before we get an answer to that. We're not going to watch his first 3 games and say he's back or he's done. It won't be quite that simple, but obviously he's put a ton of work into getting himself back to the point where he can play again. And I don't think it'll be long after he signs before you see him play games, because, it sounds like he's more or less ready to go now once he, officially signs his contract.
Do you have a prediction on where he will sign?
My gut feeling has all along been Detroit. And so I'm going to stick with Detroit, but sadly, by the time the listener is listening to this, he might already be like flying to Florida and joining the Panthers. I mean, I will acknowledge that that's not but I've been consistent with Detroit. I was asked by someone, I'm trying to remember, someone asked when we were in Stockholm. There was a few of us insider types around a table, and I went with Detroit there. And so I think it's always good to go with what your instincts were. Detroit is a kind of organization, not very leaky. So that's certainly not information coming from their front office, but I think it's made a lot of sense with Alex DeBrincat, with whom, Kane enjoyed a lot of success during their time together in Chicago. A team that's on the rise, a team that has the ability to bring him in and give him what I would deem to be a fair contract. And, maybe they're willing to go a couple of years with him, and he's viewing this as, okay, Detroit's probably not a Stanley Cup favorite this year, but can they build into one by the time, while he's still in his window to play. And so, if he's trying to win a cup this year, it's probably Florida or the Rangers. But if he's taking a slightly longer term view, and of course you can only be so long term. I mean, Kane just turned 35 recently. So he's obviously getting towards the later stages of his career, but I think Detroit would make a whole lot of sense.
Okay. Let's get to Corey Perry and a weird unfolding situation in Chicago. So we know last week he doesn't partake in a practice due to organizational reasons. Players are asked about it. They say they don't know anything. He doesn't play in the next game after that practice. And then it gets to a point where he's away from the team. The team says it's their doing. Then a statement comes out from Perry's agent, Pat Morris, saying that it's Perry's doing and then he's going to be with his family and he appreciates privacy at this time. Where are we at with Corey Perry? Why is he not with the team? What do we know about the situation so far?
Well, we definitely don't know enough. I mean, and it's even a little slightly stranger than you portrayed it, because he took the morning skate Wednesday in Columbus, didn't play in that game, and then has basically been gone from the team since. So, I mean, it's unusual to see a player take the a regular player in the lineup, take the morning skate and then not play in that game. I mean, that's already unusual, right? Typically those things are just, hey, get a little sweat on, get ready for the game. And in Perry's case has not been seen around the Blackhawks since. I think it's been made more strange by how little the Blackhawks have said or the way they've said it. I mean, obviously it's a sensitive situation. I think that it's fair to infer that by the way Luke Richardson, their head coach, has had to talk about it. Even Kyle Davidson came out over the weekend and spoke to the reporters there in Chicago and was very careful with what he said, really didn't provide a lot of clarity on where things are at, other than saying that Perry's going to be gone from the team for the foreseeable future. And as you mentioned, Perry's camp has asked for privacy for his family. And so, it's hard to gauge where this goes next. I know there's a ton of rumors and rampant speculation. You won't need much time on the Twitter app to find that. I'm not going to lend any credence to any of it because I truthfully don't know what's gone on here, other than, as I say, I think it's fair for us to infer this is a sensitive situation. And I think it's fair to question whether we see Corey Perry play for Chicago again. I mean, he's on a 1-year contract with the team. Because of how strange this all is, you wonder if there's a bridge or a road back to playing for this roster. Given the stage of his career is he at, like, is he just going to disappear? I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, I've even just tried to nose around to see, is he someone that might be be traded by the Blackhawks? Is perhaps could he get another fresh start somewhere else? And I don't have any clarification on that at all whatsoever. So it's a difficult one for us to discuss because the whole story is what we don't know, right? The list of what we don't know is far, far too long for us to really make any meaningful conclusions of what's happening. But, this is not a normal set of circumstances. I mean, players get injured, players, end up, for example, like Samuel Girard in Colorado, end up, joining the NHLPA program. Usually that's all sort of disclosed in a very normal fashion. And there's not a lot of mystery around it. I would say that there's still a ton of mystery here on what's happened that's led to Corey being away from the Blackhawks. And really there's no clarity on what the future is. Does he just come back at some point? And I really don't want to guess at that because that wouldn't be very responsible.
And of all franchises to go through a situation where they are not fully transparent with everyone about what's going on with the player in the situation, of course, it has to be an organization like the Chicago Blackhawks who have their own notable record when it comes to being transparent.
Right. I mean, they haven't earned any benefit of the doubt organizationally, right? That I think that's partly what hangs over this. I don't know that it's fair to compare what happened 10 years ago with what's going on. Like,
I'm not doing that. I'm just saying because of stuff like that, we have looked at their reputation. Their reputation's been tarnished as a result of this. You can't compare the two situations. Absolutely. You're right. But you can say that because of that incident with Cal Beach, their reputation has been tarnished on that.
Right. And because there's any number of the kind of situations that might come up that might explain why they've been, so opaque when discussing this. Now, and that could be out of privacy for Perry and his family. It could be because there's legal matters at stake. It could be like there's any number of reasons for it. I think it was good they had Kyle Davidson at least come and speak to the reporters because, ultimately if the GM, has authority in these matters and, I hope that they continue to at least shed whatever light they can here. But yeah, it's kind of this strange holding pattern. And, given where Corey Perry's at in his career, what's going on? I mean, I don't know where this goes next. We should mention too, if there is a situation where they can trade him, I mean, he's signed at a $4 million cap hit. So it's that was a contract that made sense for the Blackhawks in the offseason because, they wanted Perry and Nick Foligno both to come in and sort of mentor a young team, a roster with rookies like Connor Bedard and Kevin Kurchinski and other players that are in the early stages of their development as pros. But it's not a contract that would make sense to most other teams trying to win a Stanley Cup. And so this is, it's clear as mud, and I want to be careful with how I choose my words around it, but very unusual situation. And I don't know where the resolution comes here.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that if anything else develops. I also want to bring up Jacob Trouba before we get to Ask CJ. Very interesting video over the weekend. I didn't get to watch the Rangers-Bruins game, but you saw the incident where Jacob Trouba gets his stick up on Trent Frederic of the Boston Bruins and kind of whacks him. That goes for a $5,000 fine. No other suspension or discipline handed out after that. I don't even think in the game there was a major penalty doled out for Jacob.
And it was unpenalized.
Yes, exactly. Did you see? So of course you saw it. What did you think of what happened?
Well, did you see all the angles?
Yes. I should say this. There are two prominent angles that presented themselves, and a second one was made to be believed that it wasn't as reckless as some people thought. But I still kind of think it's a bit reckless. Like, I get it, like Trouba and Frederick are tussling with each other, and then because he's sort of off balance, that's why Trouba kind of lifts the stick the way that he does. But even then, like, it's a whack to the head. And I think the only reason why it's not a bigger deal is because Trent Frederick seems like he's fine as a result of that. But that could have gone completely different.
Right. But the secondary angle, I would say for me, does make it look a little bit more, certainly less vicious. Like I don't know if we call it fully accidental, but the first lower angle one, I mean, this is where you got to be careful when I wasn't watching that game either. It was an afternoon game on the weekend. But I was out getting a Christmas tree, but I will say this, that like the one lower angle does look really bad. The secondary one's like, okay, I can see now it's a battle. He's a little off balance. His stick gets high. I mean, you got to be responsible for your stick. I think the fact that Frederick wasn't injured does factor in here. Ultimately, this is where I land. I would not have had a problem, and I would have understood if there had been, a suspension there. I saw some people saying it should be a 20-game suspension or something like that. Like this, let's be clear. This was not like the baseball bat swing from Brashear back in the day, or like we've seen literally people two-hand another player in the head. It's not that. I mean, there's a battle happening around the net. I think it's unfortunate the way it goes. I could see the case for that to have been more than just a fine. And I think it's almost like, because the fines, it's a $5,000 max fine for those that don't know that players can receive. And so when you have someone who makes $7 or $8 million, it almost just looks like a laughably, it's like me or you getting fined $2 or something it's like a swear jar or something. Proportionally speaking.
That $2 is worth a little bit more to me than you, sir.
Well, you know what I'm saying. Like, I think it almost it doesn't look very punitive to a player that earns the kind of salary Trouba does. But I mean, that's with the CBA, that's the most allowed there. So where I land is, if that had been like a 2-game suspension, I would have thought that was probably appropriate, especially with the second angle. But obviously this is, look, that was a kind of a heated game. Bruins and Rangers are two of the better teams. Trouba, quite rightly has earned a reputation. He's a tough guy to play against. Obviously a king of the open ice hit. But I don't think it was egregious as some others might out there, just because of that second angle.
I don't know. I think we would look at it a lot differently if it was at least penalized in the moment. Like, and then maybe that causes some other discussion as well.
Well, and if there's an injury, I mean, frankly,
that too. The injury thing is the big thing.
And like, if we're sitting here and like, I'm not trying to imagine this alternate universe, but like Frederick's like stretchered off or something, like it's the discussion around it is totally different, right? It's more that this just happened in the game, not even penalized. And then, the video surfaces afterwards for those of us who are watching live. So unfortunately, that does factor in, I think, though, to like how you view something. Whether, I guess there's a relevant discussion, should that matter or not? But I do think it matters that the player wasn't injured and, the game just went on.
Okay. And with that, I think it's time for us to get to Ask CJ, unless there's anything else you wanted to add on Jacob Trouba.
No, I think I'm good on him. I could talk
All
more
right,
about
so
Christmas trees, but I might be boring our audience. So
I don't know if you'd be boring our audience. We are less than a month away from Christmas time.
I should say this is great
you guys
restraint
agree.
for me to get to the end of November before. Because
You must already have Christmas music playing.
oh man, I've had Christmas music playing since like November 1st.
Yeah, like as soon as Halloween was done, you put away all the arrow bars. You were just like, hey, let's blast.
No,
Mariah
now
Carey.
I eat the arrow bars to Christmas music. It's just like it's like uniting two amazing things.
I know what to get you for Christmas now.
But yes.
That's never been a doubt in my mind. I need to. At some point, I will get your address. I'll get you your gift.
Oh man,
Yeah, you deserve it, buddy, for all the work that you do.
thanks, man. Thanks, man. But I'm in the festive spirit, needless to say.
Which is good. Which is good.
We're
I'm
less than
starting
a
to
month
get into
away,
that.
bud. I hope you're doing some Christmas
know.
shopping for anyone you need to buy for in your life.
It's I started doing some over the weekend for Black Friday. We are on Cyber Monday, so I may take advantage of that time to finish off some last minute shopping for some loved ones.
Can you believe this?
Yeah, I think I've made some good headway.
A colleague was telling me last week that she has done her shopping.
I can believe that.
I mean,
I
I have
can believe
never
that.
I have never been finished shopping in November. I mean, I'm usually not finished before December 24th, if we're being honest. So
Here's the thing: the idea of going shopping. Hold on a second. You're an in-person shopper. You're going in them lines and you're
Yeah,
going to get gifts
often.
and stuff on it. I can't do that. I can't do that. Especially closer to Christmas. It's just insanity. The lines are long. They're insane. Depending on where you're at.
right, but they're
the
playing
people in there are a
Christmas
bit rabid.
music, and it's like there's a certain buzz in the air. The
Yeah,
gentle snow
but
falls outside on your car. It's nice.
Yeah, but you know what I could do? I could, do that from the comfort of my own abode and like make hot chocolate and drink from my office. And like, you see this here mouse? Just go on these websites, go click, 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 add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, and get everything in time. Why should I put myself through a position where I'm in line losing the Christmas spirit because I'm in line for like an hour
This is
when
the-
I could just be at my own
This is
crib
the
doing it?
generational divide rearing its head again. I mean, don't get me
my
wrong.
God.
Obviously, I do some online.
Generational divide.
I do some online shopping, but dude, I'm I'm calling myself out.
You're not that old. You're
But
like
I'm just saying the-
something.
The difference is between the 15 years between us is I'm just used to going out and I kind of like it.
It's not that I haven't. It's you know what I've done the other thing. Depending on who you do it with, it's fine. I guess I don't know, but like I would much rather be in a situation where I have everything done and I don't have to worry about.
But
it.
then
For
you
me,
got to worry about
especially-
returns. Something comes in, it's not exactly what you want. You got to like it's a pain.
I guess, like knock on wood. I guess the one thing for me.
Well, you send
I
gifts
order-
to Montreal too, right?
I do send.
So that
gifts.
is
what I do
practical. That is practical.
Yes. Yeah, that I think is very convenient. Literally, I ordered a gift from my mom the other day, and like when you order stuff on Amazon, you get like the little photo from the delivery guy being like, "Hey, your order made it." I expected the thing that I ordered for my mom to be in some box that no one would notice. It's like out in clear day. This box with the like everything is out there.
See, that's
Like,
the
they made-
downside too.
That's the downside. It's like they literally went to a store, they found it, and they just put it in front of my parents' place.
So-
And I had to be like, I had to go to my sister and be like, please, like, take it and hide it.
Not a
Like-
lot of mystery coming around your tree on the 25th. All your family's going to know
Oh my
exactly what you got
God.
wrapped for them.
Oh my God. Anyway, we don't have to do that. We can. I'm just glad Christmas is coming up, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to share gifts with our loved ones.
Yes, sir.
Let's get to these questions. Jonathan Clement coming to Toronto during the holiday, going to see the Marlies game on the 26th at the big rink. Anything I shouldn't miss while I'm in Toronto?
Well, I'd love to ask follow-up questions to Jonathan. Like, have you been here before? Are you a massive hockey fan? Because I would say if you are going to the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is a short walk from Scotiabank Arena, should be on your list. You don't need a ton of time there. 90 minutes, 2 hours would definitely do it. it's cool to walk around and look at all of the old history, to walk through the Habs dressing room. If you got a kid with you, there's some interactive stuff you can do. And then obviously going up to the Great Hall and looking at the Stanley Cup and all the other trophies. I mean, if you've never been there before, that's pretty neat. I actually went to the Hall of Fame one of my birthdays as a kid. Like I remember I was somewhere like say 12 or 13 range, and I got to bring a couple buddies, and we came into the city and went to Hall of Fame. Like that was pretty cool. So I would say like that would be on my must-do list, depending on if you've been there before and on what level of a hockey fan you are. I mean, if you're someone who doesn't really like hockey, you're probably not going to get much out of that experience. But I mean, if you're listening to a hockey podcast and asking questions of hockey podcasters, the odds are, and you're going to a Marlies game on Boxing Day, probably means you're a hockey fan. So that would be pretty high on my list. If you're a Maple Leafs fan and you like history, you could go up to the old Maple Leaf Gardens on College Street in Toronto. There's actually a Loblaws grocery store in the lobby, and in one of the aisles, it actually has marked where the center ice dot was at Maple Leaf Gardens. So that's kind of like a cool. Again, I'm talking for the hardcore hockey nerd, but maybe hasn't been to Toronto before. Like something like that is pretty neat. I mean, you can even go into what's called the Mattamy Arena now, and it's still the old rink, from Maple Leaf Gardens. In terms of like cool things to do, I'm not the right one to ask. I mean, there's lots of great restaurants and bars downtown Toronto that you could probably hit. But if you're looking for the hockey fans guide, I always look for cool stuff like that. Like we just had the 106th anniversary of the forming of the NHL. Like I love going to Montreal by the Windsor Hotel, and just seeing the little plaque they have there, and just like this is the ground, this is where the NHL was formed. Stuff like that I always find kind of neat if I go to a city. So something like the center ice dot and like aisle 26 of the Loblaws or whatever it is kind of neat. And then obviously the Hall of Fame, lots going on there. And you could go to St. Lawrence Market, not far from the rink, pick up like a sandwich for lunch. I like walking around downtown Toronto. It's a great little city.
I love the Chris Johnston's guide to hanging out in Toronto. I love that little guide. That's pretty cool.
There you go. I mean, again, if you're looking for the great restaurants and bars, like just Google that Toronto Life, or someone is got that all ranked for you. But I'll give you a few little nuggets for the hockey fan.
From I don't know if it's Chal Dreams or Shawl Dreams. Where did CJ run in Stockholm? Anything special he saw during the run streak? And please thank him for the quick chat with a starstruck woman, me, at the hotel bar Sunday after the game with the Wild beat writer. I presume you were hanging out with Michael Russo.
Yes, sir. That's great. It was great to meet you too. I ran around the harbor area mostly. Stockholm's a nice city. Obviously it's on the water. It's a series of islands, and you could basically get on a path. Like once I just got a little away from my hotel, I could get on a path and you could run as far as you could run essentially, and be, separated from traffic, which is nice. I ran around the island called Skeppsholmen, which is like an old Navy base, I think. And that was really cool. And then along the harbor and then back, basically the last morning, I did a totally different run than I'd done. I ran in an entirely different direction. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was even better. And I saw a ton of other runners on there. And so I think that's probably where the hardcore Stockholm runners would be running. But always on the water. And it was nice. I kept the streak going there, as you might expect. It was a lot of runs in the dark and a little bit of cold and snow the last morning, but it was a lovely city and a great visit.
Okay. From Murat Atesh, a friend of the show, Winnipeg Jets beat writer. I don't know your guys' origin story. How did you get to know each other to the point of doing this pod? And since I'm assuming you knew who each other were before working together, I want to know what surprised you about the other. For example, what's a weird or fun habit of CJ's?
Well, our origin story is kind of, it's funny, right, Julian? We didn't know each other. We knew of each other reputationally or by name, but didn't know each other personally when we first endeavored to do this. We actually taped a long ago episode, Murat, that never saw the light of day. It was basically like a pilot episode when we were sort of figuring out, could this work? Would it make sense? And I don't know if that exists somewhere in Adam Wild's hard drive or if it's just been lost to the annals of time. And man, it's probably been better than I could have imagined. The way it's gone. Are we into the 200s of episodes yet?
Yeah, we're in the 200s.
And we've met each other maybe 5 or 6 times in person, mostly just around doing shows, whether we were in Nashville or Montreal live. Obviously, you've been to Toronto a couple times where we've done live shows. Had a lunch one day, brunch sort of, me, you, and Nick. And when you were coming through Toronto, I think last season with the Flames, but we haven't met each other a ton, relatively speaking, any of us in person. And yet we get together twice a week for most of the year and record these shows. So it's been wonderful, but I just had heard great things about you. Was looking to try to find someone to do a podcast with. You were the one and only person who auditioned with me. I didn't get beyond the idea stage with anybody else. And I feel like we had pretty good chemistry right from the get-go.
Yeah. Basically the same boat for me. Like I had heard about you and I definitely had tweeted at you before, but just getting to know you through this process has been so fun. CJ's right. There is a demo episode that we put together. I know I have my copy of the episode.
Ooh.
I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day. Very fascinating.
How long ago would
to
we
go
have
through
done
it.
that? Would that be like around 3 years ago now?
I guess so. Like it was just before the Canadian division season started. Like we'd recorded that maybe like a month or a couple weeks before the Canadian division started.
Which was January 2021. So we probably recorded it in December 2020, meaning 3 years ago.
Exactly. So wow, yeah, we're probably coming up on the anniversary of us actually like.
I don't
meeting
even
each
think
other
you
over
worked at
Zoom
the
for the first
Athletic
time.
yet, if I remember correctly.
Nope. I was
I was still at Sportsnet.
Yep. I was at least a month away from doing anything related to the Athletic.
So professionally speaking, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Literally like that, like this podcast coming together came at like a very fascinating turning point in my career because all these other different opportunities were coming together and like this was part of it. So yeah, like that happened.
I'm glad you jumped on board. I'm glad it worked out. I mean, who knows how these things go? I remember Arpin Basu, now our shared colleague at the Athletic, but a good buddy of mine going back a long, long time, was singing your praises big time, pushing me to work with you. And man, it's worked out great. I mean, I don't think you can ever know though. I mean, we could be best buddies and know each other well. And then it might not work for a show. I don't know. Maybe you butt heads. Maybe one person's always late or does something that bugs you and it just doesn't work. I mean, I feel like we both have busy work schedules. We always find a way along with Nick to do the shows together. We get along well. Minus your choices
I'll
of chocolate.
say this. Yeah, the chocolate thing is weird. The one thing I will say though, there was that period of time where we did the demo and we didn't know if the show was going to happen, and then it starts later in the fall. What I will always be grateful to you for is your willingness to still have some kind of dynamic and relationship in between that. And even if it was just through text messages and just, maybe I might have DM'd you once or twice, but even if it was just those small moments, I will always appreciate you for that because there was a period where we did not know if a podcast was still going to happen, and you were still willing to engage me in conversation at times. There was even a point, you definitely don't remember this. I still had a podcast called the Scrum Podcast, which was just a podcast that a friend of mine, Tristan Damour and me, we would talk to people in media. We would talk about whatever's going on in Canadian sports media. You were the very last guest we ever had on that show, and that was just as the playoffs began.
I killed your show.
No, you didn't really kill the show. It was just for me, it was getting to a point where stuff was just getting busy,
right? And
I couldn't really do the show anymore. But you were, from what I remember, you were the last like guest that we had. That might be the last episode we ever did. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, this is cool, we get CJ. But there was another part of me that was like, this is probably as good of a test as we could do to see if, like, we did the demo, but like doing a pod could actually like kind of work. Because like I'm asking you questions anyway. And I think it worked.
It worked, man. I don't know what percentage of shows ever get to 200 episodes, but it worked. Not that we're going anywhere. I don't want to make this sound like this is like, no. And then they were done.
That's it, guys. Bye. No, we're here, man. We're here for many lifetimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
We only have so much time left. Let's get to these questions real quickly here. From Domar NL on Discord. If you had the chance to refurnish a media room in the NHL, which would it be, and what improvements would you make?
Oh my God. I don't know. Do you need the Flames have the oldest building there? Do you think it needs an upgrade there, Julian, or what?
You know what? If you think it does,
I'm not.
You could say
I'm
that.
not traveling the league as
I'm-
much these days. If I'm
I'm
being
not
totally
going to be
honest,
the
like
one
I
to
don't
say
get around the
anything.
league like I used to. So
I'm not going to be the one to say it. If you think it is,
do they still
you
serve
say
beer
it.
after the game in the Calgary media room?
Yes, they do.
Well, if they do that, then I'm fine with whatever the rest of the room looks like.
My pick would have been the Canadian Tire Center. The first time I ever went to a game there in the media room, there was like a really nasty like stain on the carpet. I believe they have since gotten rid of it. I went a couple weeks ago, and it looks completely new.
There you
So
go.
I guess that would have been my pick. But
Honestly, most of them aren't really that nice, but I don't want nice. Like I just need a place to sit and write my story. I don't want to hang out there too
Yeah.
long for the most part. Like you just got to get your work done and get out of there. So I'm not throwing shade at any media rooms, but I appreciate the question. Like points for creativity there.
exactly. What is your favorite holiday tradition with family or friends? This is from Dallas Stars fan on Discord.
Well, I'm a huge Christmasite, and I love just spending time with my family. We don't always get to do it on the 25th. My sister has kids. She lives in Ottawa. My brother has kids. He lives in Mississauga. So getting all together sometimes it's not right on the exact date, but just being together, having mimosas the way we used to with my mom on Christmas morning. Rest in peace, Mom, was nice. And I'm looking forward to doing that again here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I like the idea of just being together with family, and also if I can spend time with friends too, and other cousins and other relatives, other close family members, like just any opportunity I get to see people during the holidays, whether it's just like on one day or you're hopping from one house to another house, like I just love the idea of just being with people that you love. Last one from Cam Jenkins Live: waffles or pancakes?
Pancakes.
Why pancakes?
I prefer them. They're good. I don't have anything against waffles. If you're making either, I will eat either. But if I get a
Yep,
choice,
I
I like when you put a pancake, maybe put some like apple in it, or you put something to spice it up. I like that. But I don't eat a lot of either, but I would have a pancake if given the choice.
Pancake, you can get yourself some maple syrup. You can add some other breakfast stuff on top. Waffles, I just prefer like jam. You put like strawberry jam like on top or something like that. Or like Eggos used to have this thing where like they combined like two and they had some kind of jam in between. But you know, you don't always have to do that. I'm good with either. It doesn't really matter.
I don't eat a
Anyway.
lot of breakfast if I'm being honest. So
Yeah, we both should probably eat a lot more breakfast in our respective diets.
I like this way. But
You like not eating breakfast?
yeah, I think it's like, it's like the intermittent fasting. I know it's kind of it's like a buzzy thing people do, but I basically just eat between noon and 8 every day, more or less.
When we have more time, we'll get into your dietary habits on this.
I don't think anyone needs to hear about that.
Over 200 episodes, and we've gotten that comfortable enough where we know you don't eat breakfast
Most days.
most days. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday with stick taps and more nonsense and storylines across the National Hockey. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Inside the game twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK and McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.